Have you ever noticed how the smallest text can completely change your night? One buzz, one glance at your phone, and suddenly, all the energy you'd been holding, all the quiet excitement, just evaporates. Hey, I'm so sorry, but that's all it takes. You were ready. You picked the outfit days ago. You even imagined the conversations you'd have, the laughter, the feeling of belonging again. And then, just like that, you're standing there, dressed for a night that doesn't exist anymore. Your reflection looks back at you, half embarrassed, half tired. And underneath your polite, no worries text, there's a quiet ache you don't talk about. Because the truth is, it's never just about the plans. It's about what the cancellation represents. Rejection, unimportance, the slow erosion of trust. It's a feeling you've known before, the soft sting of being forgotten, the echo of being too easy to let down. But here's the thing most people never realize. Cancellation is a language, and every time it happens, whether you're the one sending the text or the one receiving it, something unspoken is being said. There's something you need to understand about cancellation. It's a language, not the words in the text message, but what lives beneath them. When someone cancels on you repeatedly, when they pull away at the last moment again and again, they're telling you something they can't say directly. And when you're the one canceling, when you feel that surge of relief the moment you press send, you're speaking too. You're both communicating in the dialect of distance, in the grammar of self-protection. But here's what makes it so quietly devastating. You're speaking different languages entirely, even when you're using the same words. When they cancel, you hear, "You're not worth the effort. You're not important enough. You're easy to disappoint." You hear all the old voices that taught you your value was measured in how much space you were allowed to take up, how much inconvenience you were worth. You hear every time you were second choice, every time you waited and no one came. But what they're often saying is something else entirely. They're saying, "I can't hold myself together right now. I can't perform the version of me that I think I need to be. I'm afraid if you see me as I actually am, you'll leave anyway, so I'm leaving first." Two people, both terrified, both protecting themselves from a pain that hasn't happened yet, both alone in rooms they didn't want to be in, thinking they're the only one who feels this way. Let's talk about what happens in the hours before the cancellation. The person who's about to cancel knows, usually. They've known since morning, maybe since the night before. There's this weight that's been building, this resistance in their body that feels almost physical. The closer the time gets, the heavier it becomes. It's not that they don't care about you. It's that they're drowning in something you can't see from the outside. Maybe they woke up and the depression was there. That specific heaviness that makes even showering feel like climbing a mountain. Maybe the anxiety has been whispering all day, cataloging every way the evening could go wrong, every way they might say the wrong thing or laugh at the wrong moment or be too much or not enough. Maybe they looked in the mirror and saw someone they didn't want to present to the world, and the thought of maintaining a facade for 3 hours felt genuinely impossible. Maybe they're in a relationship that's slowly breaking them, and they don't have the energy to pretend to be okay. Maybe they're grieving something no one knows about. Maybe they're just so tired of being a person. And here's the cruel math of it. The closer they get to the actual moment, the more impossible it becomes. Not easier, harder, because now they're dealing with the guilt of canceling on top of everything else. Now they have to craft a message that sounds believable but not too detailed, sorry but not too sorry, casual enough to not raise alarms, but sincere enough to not sound callous. So they wait. They wait until the last possible moment, until you're already getting ready, until the cancellation will hurt the most. Not because they want to hurt you, but because that's when the equation finally tips, when the pain of going finally exceeds the pain of canceling. And you, on the other side of that message, you're doing math too. You're counting. How many times has this happened? 3, 5. At what number do you stop believing the excuses? At what point does something came up start to sound like you're not a priority? You're also remembering. Every time you got excited about something and it fell through. Every time you were promised something and it evaporated. Every birthday party you threw where half the people didn't show. Every time you were the one waiting. The one who cared too much. The one who couldn't take a hint. You're 12 years old, and it's your birthday party, and only 2 people came. You're 16, and your best friend bailed on prom plans to go with someone cooler. You're 23, and the person you loved kept saying they'd come visit and never did. You're 35, and your father said he'd make it to your work event and didn't. You're here, right now, in this moment, and it's not really about tonight at all. This is the archaeology of disappointment. Every cancellation is a new layer of sediment on top of all the others, and eventually, you forget what the original ground looked like. You forget that not everyone is every person who ever let you down. You forget that sometimes a cancellation is just a cancellation, not a referendum on your worth. But how could you forget, when it's happened so many times that it feels like truth? Here's what nobody tells you about being someone who cancels habitually. You hate yourself for it. Every single time. The relief you feel when you cancel. And yes, there is relief. Profound and immediate. It lasts maybe 30 seconds before the guilt crashes in. And the guilt is crushing. Because you know what you're doing. You know you're hurting someone. You know you're becoming unreliable. You know you're building a reputation as someone who can't be counted on. You tell yourself you'll do better next time. You'll push through the anxiety. You'll honor your commitments. You'll be the person you want to be, the person you pretend to be when you make plans while you're feeling good. But then next time comes, and the same thing happens. The same weight, the same impossibility, the same terrible choice between 2 types of suffering. And you cancel again, and you hate yourself again, and the cycle continues. What's really happening here is a crisis of identity. There are 2 versions of you. The you who makes plans, who believes they can be social and present and okay, and the you who actually has to show up and be that person. And the distance between those 2 versions feels unbridgeable. The you who makes plans is optimistic. They're thinking about the future with hope. They're imagining a version of the evening where everything goes well, where the conversation flows, where you feel like yourself, or rather, where you feel like the self you wish you were. That version of you can say yes to anything, because they're not the one who has to follow through. But the you who has to show up is dealing with reality. The exhaustion, the anxiety, the depression, the sensory overload, the social battery that's already drained, the mask that's too heavy to wear. This you knows what it actually costs to be present, and sometimes that cost is simply too high. And here's the thing that makes it all so painful. Both versions of you are real. Both are valid. Both are you. But you keep making promises on behalf of a self that may not exist when the time comes. There's a particular kind of person who gets canceled on more than others. You might be one of them. These are the people who are understanding to a fault. The ones who always say it's okay because they don't want to add to anyone's burden. The ones who accommodate, who adjust, who are flexible and patient and kind. And precisely because you're so understanding, precisely because you make it easy to cancel on you, people do. It's not conscious, usually. It's not that they think, Oh, they'll understand, so it's fine. It's more subtle than that. It's that when they're doing the terrible calculus of who to disappoint, you end up on one side of the equation because disappointing you feels less dangerous than disappointing someone who might actually get angry. Someone who might have boundaries. Someone who might say, "This is the third time, and I'm done." You've made yourself safe to hurt. And that's not actually kindness. Not to them, and definitely not to yourself. It's a kind of self-abandonment dressed up as compassion. Because here's what you're really saying when you immediately respond with "It's okay. Don't worry about it. I don't matter enough to be upset about. My time isn't valuable. My feelings aren't important. Disappointing me has no consequences." And they hear that. Maybe not consciously, but they hear it. And so the cancellations continue. Let's sit with something uncomfortable for a moment. Sometimes, when someone cancels on you repeatedly, they're actually trying to tell you something they don't have the courage to say directly. They don't want to spend time with you. Not because you're bad or wrong or worthless, but because the relationship isn't working for them anymore. Because you've grown apart. Because the friendship was built for a different season of life. Because the energy between you doesn't feel right. And they can't say that. How do you say that to someone without destroying them? How do you say, "I don't enjoy our time together anymore," without sounding cruel? So instead, they cancel, and cancel again, and again, hoping you'll get the message without them having to deliver it. This is cowardice, yes, but it's also a kind of misguided kindness. They think they're protecting you. They think being indirect is gentler than being honest. They don't understand that the repeated cancellations hurt more than the truth ever would. That wondering and second-guessing and feeling disposable is worse than hearing, "I think we've outgrown this friendship." And if you're the person doing the canceling, you need to ask yourself, am I canceling because I genuinely can't make it? Or am I canceling because I don't want to admit I don't want to go? Am I protecting their feelings? Or am I protecting myself from an uncomfortable conversation? Because if it's the latter, you're not being kind. You're being cruel in slow motion. You're teaching someone to doubt themselves, to feel unworthy, to question every relationship they have. And that's worse than honesty, no matter how much the honesty might sting initially. But sometimes, and this is important, sometimes the cancellation really isn't about you at all. Sometimes people are genuinely drowning in their own lives, their own pain, their own impossibility. And they cancel because they literally cannot show up. Not because they don't value you, but because they can't even show up for themselves. The hard part is knowing which is which. The excruciating part is that you often can't know. You have to choose what story to believe, knowing you might be wrong either way. You can believe that they're struggling and this isn't personal, and risk being taken advantage of, risk enabling behavior that hurts you, risk investing in someone who's actually just not that interested. Or you can believe that they don't value you and protect yourself, and risk abandoning someone who genuinely needs patience and grace. Risk ending a relationship that could have been beautiful if you just held on a little longer. There's no clean answer here. No formula. No way to protect yourself from all possible hurt. What helps, maybe, is getting curious instead of certain. When someone cancels, instead of immediately going to "they don't care about me," or "they're going through something," you might try, "I don't know what this means yet. I'm going to gather more information." Watch patterns, not incidents. One cancellation is just one cancellation. 3 cancellations might be a rough month. 6 cancellations with no attempt to reschedule, no real explanation, no apparent care about the impact. That's a pattern. That's information. Also watch. Do they reschedule? Do they reach out? Do they acknowledge the cancellation affected you? Do they take responsibility? Or do they always have an excuse that makes you feel bad for even being disappointed? And watch yourself. Are you making excuses for them that they're not making for themselves? Are you explaining away their behavior to protect yourself from having to make a hard decision? Are you so afraid of losing them that you're accepting treatment that's hurting you? If you're someone who cancels, here's what you need to know. Your mental health struggles are valid. Your need for rest is valid. Your boundaries around your energy are valid. All of that is true and real and important. And it's also true that you're hurting people. Both things can be true at once. You don't have to choose between taking care of yourself and being reliable. But you do have to get more honest with yourself and with others about what you can actually handle. Stop making plans when you're feeling good that you know you probably can't keep when you're feeling bad. Stop saying yes to things 3 weeks from now that you can barely imagine doing tomorrow. Stop optimistically overestimating your capacity and then punishing yourself when reality doesn't match. Start being honest earlier. I'm having a hard time right now, and I can't commit to plans. Can we do something lower pressure, like a phone call? Or can we tentatively schedule this with the understanding that I might need to cancel? That feels vulnerable and scary, but it's so much kinder than repeated last-minute cancellations. Start rescheduling immediately. If you cancel, you suggest a new time in the same message. Not, we'll figure something out soon, but I can't do Thursday. But what about Sunday afternoon? This shows that you actually want to see them, that the cancellation is really about this specific time, not about them. And start taking responsibility without over-apologizing. I need to cancel tonight. I'm not in good shape. Can we try for Saturday? Is better than 5 paragraphs of apology and explanation that make the other person feel like they have to comfort you about canceling on them. And if you're someone who gets canceled on, here's what you need to know. You're allowed to be hurt. You're allowed to be disappointed. You're allowed to have boundaries. You're allowed to say, I care about you, but I can't keep making plans that don't happen. It's starting to affect how I feel about our friendship. You're not being mean. You're not being unreasonable. You're not being too sensitive. You're protecting something that matters. Your time, your energy, your heart. And sometimes protecting those things means letting go of people who keep proving they can't or won't show up for you. That doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you incompatible in this season of life. Grieve that if you need to. It's okay to be sad about what could have been if things were different. But don't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Don't keep making space for someone who keeps proving they don't want to be in it. Here's something that might help both sides understand each other. Imagine you're holding a cup, and someone asks you to pour them some water. If your cup is full, you can pour easily. If your cup is half full, you can pour, but you're conscious of it, watching to make sure you don't give too much. And if your cup is empty, even if you desperately want to give them water, you can't. You literally can't pour from an empty cup. The person asking doesn't know your cup is empty. They just know they're thirsty, and you said you'd help. They're not wrong for being disappointed when you can't. And you're not wrong for having an empty cup. You're not wrong for needing to refill before you can give. But you are responsible for communicating honestly about the state of your cup. And they're responsible for deciding whether they can accept a relationship with someone whose cup is often empty. Neither of you is the villain here. You're just two people trying to get your needs met. And sometimes those needs are incompatible. Sometimes you both need to be cared for at the same time, and no one has the capacity to be the caretaker. That's not failure. That's just the reality of human limitation. What if we reimagine the whole thing? What if we stopped making plans as promises and started making them as possibilities? What if we built in more flexibility, more honesty, more room for human fragility. What if the person prone to canceling said up front, "I struggle with this. I want to see you, and I might cancel. It's not about you. Can we make peace with that uncertainty together?" And what if the person who gets canceled on said, "I hear that, and I appreciate the honesty. Here's what I need. If you cancel more than once without rescheduling, I'm going to assume you're not available for friendship right now, and I'm going to stop reaching out, not out of anger, but out of self-care." What if we all just got more honest about who we are and what we can actually handle, and let people make informed decisions about whether they want to be in relationship with us? It wouldn't fix everything. Some relationships would end. Some disappointment would still happen, but it would be cleaner, more mutual, less like betrayal, and more like acknowledgement of reality. Because here's the thing underneath all of this, the thing we're all dancing around. We're all terrified of being truly seen and still being left. So we manage how we're perceived. We cancel instead of saying, "I can't handle being social." We say it's fine instead of "this hurt me." We avoid honesty because honesty feels like handing someone a weapon and hoping they won't use it. But the strange, counterintuitive truth is that honesty, real, vulnerable, uncomfortable honesty, is actually the only way to build something real. When you show someone who you actually are, in all your messy limitation, and they stay, you know they're staying for you. Not for the version of you that you perform. You. And yes, some people will leave when they see the real you. That's the risk. But do you really want people in your life who are only there because you're hiding? The person who cancels last minute is afraid. The person who gets canceled on is afraid. You're both afraid of the same thing, not matching, not being chosen, being too much or not enough, being disposable. And so you're both protecting yourselves in the only ways you know how. One by pulling away before they can be rejected. One by staying understanding before they can be abandoned. But protection isn't connection. Safety isn't love. And the walls you build to keep pain out also keep everything else out too. Maybe the answer isn't figuring out how to never be hurt. Maybe it's learning to be with hurt when it comes. To feel disappointment without it confirming your worst beliefs about yourself. To be canceled on without it meaning you're cancelable. Maybe it's learning that you can be disappointed in someone and still love them. That you can set boundaries and still be kind. That you can need space and still care. That all of this can be true at once. Complicated and messy and real. You're standing in your good shirt in an empty room again. The evening dissolved. The person canceled. But this time, maybe, you take a breath and you don't immediately make it mean something about your worth. Maybe you let yourself feel disappointed without drowning in it. Maybe you notice the old voices rising up. The ones that say you're always second choice. Always disposable. And you acknowledge them without believing them. Maybe you text back something true. "I'm disappointed, but I understand. I hope you're taking care of yourself. Let's try to reschedule soon." And then maybe you do something kind for yourself. Not in a frantic, "I'll show them I don't need them" way, but in a gentle, "I'm here, I matter," even when plans fall through way. Maybe you make the dinner you were going to share. Maybe you watch the movie alone. Maybe you call someone else. Maybe you just sit with yourself and remember that your value isn't determined by who shows up. And if you're the one who canceled, maybe this time you pause after you press send. Maybe instead of drowning in guilt, you get curious about what's really happening. Maybe you ask yourself, what do I need right now? What am I really avoiding? What conversation am I not having? Maybe you actually reschedule immediately before the guilt makes you hide. Maybe you're honest about what you're struggling with, as honest as you can be. Maybe you stop trying to be the person you wish you were and start being honest about the person you are right now. In this moment, doing the best you can. Because that's all any of us are doing, really. The best we can with what we have. With our empty cups and our overflowing anxieties and our deep, aching need to be seen and loved and chosen. We're all just trying to be human in a world that asks us to be perfect. We're all just trying to connect while protecting ourselves from the connection breaking us. And sometimes we hurt each other in the trying. Sometimes we disappoint each other. Sometimes we can't show up. And sometimes showing up is all we needed. But maybe, underneath all the cancellations and disappointments and complicated mathematics of who's hurting whom, there's something simpler, something true. You matter, whether or not anyone shows up, whether or not you can show up. Your worth isn't determined by your productivity or your social capacity or your ability to be everything to everyone. You matter when you're functioning and when you're falling apart, when you're keeping commitments and when you're barely keeping yourself together, when you're the person everyone can count on and when you're the person who keeps letting people down. You matter, and so do they. And maybe that's where we start. Not with perfect behavior, not with never disappointing anyone, not with being invulnerable to disappointment, but with the simple, revolutionary act of seeing each other as whole people, struggling and trying and failing and trying again. People who hurt each other not because they're cruel, but because they're human. People who deserve honesty and patience and boundaries and grace. All of it, at once. The whole complicated mess of being human together. You're taking off your good shirt now, hanging it back in the closet. The evening didn't happen, but you did. You're still here, still whole, still worthy of plans that actually happen, of people who show up, of love that doesn't require you to shrink yourself or overextend yourself or betray yourself. And tomorrow, maybe, you'll try again. Because that's what we do. We try again. We reach out again. We hope again. We risk disappointment again because the alternative, isolation, protection, walls so high nothing can get through, that's not living. That's just existing in a very safe, very lonely room. So you'll try again. More honestly this time. More boundaried. More aware of your patterns and their patterns and what you can actually handle. And maybe it'll work out. Maybe you'll find people whose cups are full when yours is empty, who can hold space for your cancellations without taking them personally, who can be honest about their limits before they become resentments. Or maybe you'll just get a little better at being disappointed without disappearing, a little better at canceling without self-destruction, a little better at being human with other humans, messy and imperfect and trying. Maybe that's enough. Maybe you're enough. Right now, in this room, with your plans that fell through and your heart that's still tender and your hope that's bruised but not broken. You're enough.